Yeah, messieurs! Welcome back to the Muff Spearfishing channel.
Oi, that side, go on them!
From last week, I had already warned y'all that this video was going to be crazy and I did not come here to disappoint.
Inside the dash!
On this day, I was out with Make It Happen and as you can see, we were trying and chase something down.
Hurry! Oh, just give it gas, I go fall right inside.
Those splashes in front of the boat was a tuna feeding frenzy and I was getting ready to jump in and shoot one.
Hurry!
As you can tell, I was super excited because this was my first tuna ever and I knew all I had to do was make sure I landed it.
Jamil, back up!
Jamil perfectly executed that backup shot, securing my first ever Bonic Blur or false albacore. They also go by the name Bonita or Little Tunny and they are one of the smallest members of the tuna family. This one here only came in at 3.5 pounds, so it wasn't that impressive of a fish, but to me the way I caught it was just mental. That style of hunting is something I've wanted to do for a really long time and actually getting the chance to do it was really fun. Since those fish were always moving, we got back on the boat and waited for them to start feeding again. Over and over again, we would see them come up to the surface and make drops, but we always landed a little bit too far away to get any shots off. Eventually, we kinda realized it wasn't going to happen again, but right as we were about to give up, Blacker called me over to show me one of the biggest barracudas I've ever seen. As soon as I made my dive, I started grunting and doing squid fingers and I quickly realized that I was getting closer. That initial movement kinda threw me off, but then when it stopped, I realized I had just stoned this monster. As soon as I got that fish into my hands, I knew for a fact that this was my new personal best and it weighed in at 21 pounds. Another really cool thing about that fish is that I got to shoot it with Blacker, who is the person who taught me how to spearfish. From the time I was about 7 years old, I've been diving with him, so being able to shoot this monster in his presence was an amazing feeling. At this point in the day, it was still super early, so we decided to make a move to Pebbles. This was only my second or third drop here, and it wasn't long before a really nice Black Margate came out of the reef. From the way it just glided into the hole, I knew I had hit a stone shot, so I just got ready to extract it on my next dive. Because I wasn't able to get it out by pulling, I thought my spear was stuck, but luckily that wasn't the case. This fish ended up weighing in at 4 pounds, which normally would have been a really nice one, but here on the Atlantic, that's only about average size. After taking this Woudoh or Black Margate, we continued down the reef and I ended up spotting a really nice Schoolmaster from the surface. For whatever reason, the current had really started to pick up, so I knew I had to shoot and retrieve that fish on the same dive. Right away, I realized my shot placement was really bad, but luckily I was able to finesse it out of the reef. Just like that Black Margate, under normal circumstances, this 2.5 pound Schoolmaster would have been a really nice fish. However, again, everything on the Atlantic side gets way bigger and this fish would actually be below average.
The current up. It's sending down, so. Huh? I don't know. Yeah, and the other fish is just the current up. I can't even move in the current.
After that little exchange with Make It Happen, we decided to pick up the rest of the fellas and change spots to try and escape the current. Now some of y'all might actually recognize this mark because it's the exact same place I lost my spare to a giant tarpon, and it's the same place I shot my first ever permit. However, because we wasn't seeing anything big that day, I had another target in mind. I was never able to get any footage of this, but every single time I came to this mark, there was a big Black Margate hanging in this crater. Every time I saw it, it would run into the shallower water where it was way too rough for me to follow. However, this time it was different. The sea wasn't rolling nearly as much, and it allowed me to lie in that crater for much longer and wait for it to show itself. They didn't really show up on the camera, but I kept seeing smaller ones coming in and out of the shallows, and I knew it was just a matter of time before the big one came out. As soon as I got a hold of it, I had a much better idea of its size, and it ended up weighing in at 5.6 pounds. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to push past my 7-pound PB, but it was still a really nice Black Margate. After taking that beautiful Woudoh, I started looking around for a spot that I would always see really big Schoolmasters at. The only thing about that is I didn't really know where it was, so my plan was just to start making drops and shooting fish along the way. Since I was targeting snappers, I was lying on the bottom as long as possible, but then I saw a really nice Stoplight Parrotfish coming into my range. This solid 3-pounder is about as big as these fish get, and it was a really good sign that I was getting close to that snapper mark. Every time I got there, I would see these big Stoplight Parrotfish cruising around, so I knew it was just a matter of time before I saw those snappers. However, after making a couple more dives, I ended up running into a fish that I was not expecting to see. From the surface, this area looked incredibly fishy, so I made a drop and tried to find a place for me to lie down. Once I was comfortable on the bottom, I started grunting and scratching on the reef to try and attract any fish that were in the area. With all the fish around me, I knew something would be close by, and then I saw this solid Yellowjack swimming right up to me. I hit that fish a bit higher than I was hoping for, but I knew that as long as I kept it out of the reef, my shot would hold. I had a few close calls as I was swimming to the surface, but now that I was up, I could start applying a bit more pressure. As soon as I got my hands on that fish, I knew it was my new personal best, coming in at 6.7 pounds. In St. Lucia, Yellowjacks are fairly uncommon, and to see one this big is quite the exception. These are also one of my favorite fish to eat, so getting a chance at a big one like this was a really nice surprise. After taking that Yellowjack, I put it on my carrier for me to continue diving, but before I could make another drop, I found the mark I was looking for. While I was on the surface, I saw a bunch of really nice Schoolmasters, but by the time I hit the bottom, they had all disappeared. Even though I couldn't see them, I knew they would still be in the area, so I made my way to hide behind this rock. I also started grunting and scratching, and I knew that if I did that while staying hidden, there's a good chance they would come out. After giving it some time, I decided to peek around the corner, and those fish were right in front of me. It felt so good to have finally landed one of those Schoolmasters, and with the amount of fish I saw, I was really hoping to get some more. Unfortunately, they stayed out of my range after this, and it ended up being my last fish in this area. However, we wasn't done diving for the day, and we decided to make one last stop. As soon as I hopped in the water, I noticed that this area was incredibly fishy with baitfish everywhere. I didn't really understand this at the time, but when you see a lot of baitfish like this, there's a really good chance there's some monsters nearby. However, for some reason, I just wasn't being patient, and when I saw this big Woudoh coming in, I just couldn't resist. Shooting that fish could have ended really badly, but luckily nothing passed by while I wasn't ready. Now, before taking that shot, I had dropped my buoy to mark the area, and while I was putting the fish on my carrier, I saw something big. This monster mutton snapper came in to see what I was doing, so I ducked behind this sponge and I waited to make a move. I honestly couldn't believe the shot I just hit on that fish, but once I got to the surface and had my hands on it, that hunt fully registered. This fish ended up weighing in at 10 pounds, which wasn't as big as I thought, but it was still a beautiful mutton snapper. Mutton snappers are easily one of my favorite fish because they are such a challenge to hunt and they taste absolutely amazing. Also, in my opinion, that was a really well executed dive because with one wrong movement I could have spooked that fish, and I was also able to place that beautiful stone shot. I continued diving around after taking that fish, but it ended up being my last one for the day. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe as it supports my channel and so you don't miss out on any future uploads. Speaking of which, stay tuned for next week's video because it's going to be another mad one. Over the course of 2 days, I took out a bunch of really solid mutton snappers and one that even got close to beating my personal best. As always, thanks for watching and I hope to see you all next week. Later.